Yeah, this morning, as I'd said before, we're now starting to follow a specific schedule, and I've got topics laid out for this month, and I'll follow up. So last week, more than a week ago, we were focusing on our precious human life as a meditation. This one last Tuesday, and then today on the topic of death and impermanence. So over the last week, I had my mom and stepdad visiting, which was a great pleasure to see them, and that involved largely just going out to restaurants and eating a lot more than I normally would, doing sort of semi-touristy things, and walking around in pretty places, but also a lot of nice conversations. So there is something about spending time with family that if you're not in regular contact, that sort of brings back all of these echoes of memories from thoughts and mindsets I'd had when I was growing up, and concern. It's just interesting. It's a nice blend of thoughts that arise. They obviously, my stepdad is very practical, and regularly does get into conversations about death, and if folks are, if either he or my mom die or are incapacitated, what what they do, and so forth. So it's nice to feel like there's a chance to talk a bit explicitly about those things, rather than leaving it sort of unspoken. But I think still, it's a tricky subject, death. It's a subject that most people are not very comfortable talking about. It's sort of the final unpleasant topic of conversation. Sort of best we typically try to ignore or forget it, and then one day it just sneaks up on us and pounces, and we didn't get away. Ignoring it didn't help us to escape. Not talking about it, not thinking about it, didn't help anybody else to deal with our death or help us to deal with others' death any better. So it is said that this meditation on death, there's a saying, traditional saying, that of all the animals in the forest leave footprints. But of all of those, the elephant's footprint is the largest. And in the elephant's footprint, you can fit the footprints of most of the other animals. So there's a lot of meditations we might do, and they all leave an imprint or an impression in our mind. But of all of those meditations, meditation on death leaves the deepest, largest imprint. It has the biggest impact. And that could also be said of the experience of someone close to us dying, which is, in effect, obligatory meditation on death. It's a meditation on death that's forced on us, where we have to think about it and contemplate it. My wife the other day said something about working towards deathlessness, and immediately, because she spends more time more deeply absorbed in these teachings, and I'm sort of in and out with work obligations, and that phrase, that term, deathlessness, it initially didn't sit very well, very comfortably with me, because it felt like it's a term that's sometimes used in a religious context, in the Buddhist religious teachings, and it can have give the impression of like a superhero state, like some supernatural state, right? Hey, Joe. So if we think about avoiding death, what are our options for avoiding death? So options include ignoring it. That's the ostrich approach. There are various folks who are working medically on trying to imagine what it would be like to prevent humans from dying. Normally, these are like super rich people who don't want to die, and they're able to invest, hundreds of millions of dollars in, investigating what causes the telomeres on our chromosomes to get shorter and shorter, and can you stop it? And I'm not particularly optimistic that that's going to yield any huge increases in lifespan, because things die. And then there's there's the idea, there's like religious ideas of evading death by going to heaven or something supernatural, sort of. But all of those reflect our wish to not die. And I'm kind of reminded of, Woody Allen's quote, "I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve immortality through not dying," which is fair enough. So this morning I was walking past a house that was, an older house in California, probably 50 years old, something like that, maybe 60 years old. And they were doing some construction on it, and they'd ripped out some of the windows, and you could see underneath the plaster, the wood was kind of very, very old and a bit decayed around the edges. And of course, real estate in San Diego is quite precious. So if somebody has an opportunity to tear down an old house, build a new house, then someone is going to make some money. But I was looking at that house, and what's hidden beneath the plaster is this decaying wood. And I was reminded that all materials decay over time. And that beneath the surface of every building, there's some decay that's happening, and things break down on a biological level. I saw some graphs recently about how most, like kidney function, liver function, so all of those things tend to peak in your early 20s. And they all start to, the graphs gently go down, and enough of that stuff mounts, and eventually the body is not sustainable. But I thought about this house, and I thought, can a house die? Can houses die? Well, we've got an expert here. Apparently not. Well, Irene, what's your take? They don't die?
I don't believe that analogy at all.
Maybe it's not suitable.
It may not be, because awareness of the embodied energy of existing places may outweigh the choice using sustainability as an agenda priority, but they do need care and maintenance to prolong that. So it's, in a way, it's like health prevention, health maintenance, but they do not, there is nothing that inherently makes them diminished or go away. It's very material specific and often in contact with other elements of nature, like water. I could go into more detail. I'm not muted for some reason, so I should mute. Sorry.
It's great. I'm doing a long prelude here, but yeah. So the house could theoretically live a long time if there weren't other conditions. But unlike our body, because we're constantly in motion, we're constantly in change, right? Our body's metabolizing all the time, and so it's yeah. Anyway, death is certain, and it's a reality. But if we think about the idea of a house, right? It's a container for houses. I was thinking about homeless people, right? By definition, they're people who don't have a house or a home. And what we tend to do, and I remember seeing, typically you'll see homeless people and they may have very little possession, very few possessions with them. Maybe they'll have a backpack, maybe they have a big backpack, maybe they have a shopping cart. And the things that, if you've ever seen a homeless person's shopping cart, often it's very tattered belongings, some scraps of this and that. And for someone who's in more fortunate materially fortunate circumstances, it doesn't look like there's much of value there, but they hold on to it. I recently saw in San Diego a woman who had what looked like 7 or 8 shopping carts that she was sort of moving together. And it felt very sad to me. It felt like the story of someone who had had maybe an entire home and lots of possessions and lots of bedding and so forth, but had lost that home. But there's a sense in which even the things that we, in America, certainly, there's so much throwing away of things. Even the things we spend our lifetime accumulating things. We accumulate physical things, experiences, memories, relationships, activities. But we throw so many things away, right? Like the dumpsters outside my apartment are constantly filled with things, right? We throw so many things away. So when I go through stores, typically I see piles of plastic, right? It looks very similar to the stuff that's in a homeless person's cart, right? That it's maybe new and shiny right now, but soon will be broken down and soon thrown away if you accelerate everything, if you accelerate time. So this idea that we're constantly accumulating, what that does is it creates a vulnerability, right? It creates more things we can lose, more things we may become sad at parting with. And death for us means the final parting with all of our possessions, our friends, our relationships, our memories, all these kinds of things. So there's a lot of fear. It's fear wrapped up with the fear of loss, fear wrapped up with the fear of pain. And so there is a lot in there. But so back to this question that my wife had asked, she mentioned something about deathlessness. What we do when we're accumulating possessions, our minds, it makes sense to us to do that because it gives us a feeling of security, a feeling of protection, a feeling of, and can give us some actual protection. But there's nothing that will give us final protection, right, from death. So what we're doing is just prolonging or postponing having to think about there being any risk or any danger to our life. And accumulating things and accumulating shiny things, and accumulating new things, and going new places and new pictures and so forth, and going to new restaurants we'd never been to. We fill our life with novelty, right? And all of it takes our mind off of the idea that everything is decaying around us and that there's an enormous risk of, and that eventually death is going to take everything. The house always wins, as they say in the gambling world, right? And death is the house. But this idea of deathlessness, there's 2 ways to achieve deathlessness. You can become deathless. One is by the body and so forth, not dying. And the other is by changing how you think of yourself and who you think you are. And those are very different approaches. So if you think about a house, if you replace pieces of the house over time, right? Have you ever actually replaced the house? Like if you're, for example, or a car, for example, if you replace different pieces of the car over time, you might replace eventually every aspect of the car, but you still call it a car, right? You still call it my car. It still feels like it's still the same thing. And this indicates how much these things are just concepts, like our car, the house, and so forth is concept. Also our self, the sense of self, also just a concept. So I feel like I'm rambling more than I usually do. So apologies for this. Yeah, apologies for that. But so with this meditation on death, Yeah, right. Similar idea, Eileen, to that idea of the axe replacing it, right? So things are just a concept, right? The concept of a house, the concept of a company, for example. All the people come and go. The company, only the name remains, right? So then this question of, can a company die? Can a city die? Can a car die? Can a house die? Can we die? What's actually going on with this concept of death? So the purpose of meditating on death is to spend time intentionally with the idea and see what effect it has on our mind, and try to learn from our own relationship with death. Try to learn from inside how we respond to that, how we react, how it makes us feel, what we think of it. Just not in the sense, not in the spirit of being morbid, but in the spirit of acquainting ourselves with the reality that we may die today, so that it's not to avoid this practice of ignoring death, the ostrich approach. Okay, so long prelude. So let me, I'll guide the meditation. As usual, we can start with some breathing meditation just to become aware of our body. But then we can transition into recognizing how our body is impermanent and fragile, and our breath, every breath, sustains us. If our breath ceases, death comes. And so that this is a deeper meaning of breathing meditation that we can learn from. We can use our breathing meditation also to increase our wisdom. So we can find a comfortable position. We take a deep breath in and out. And another breath, just allowing ourselves to relax. Then another breath, just asking ourselves what is important right now. And we begin to become aware of our body. How we're sitting, the feelings in our body. And our breathing is just an aspect of this. It's the moving aspect of our body. And we can check, where do we feel our breath inside our body? And we can meditate very briefly on the preciousness of our human life, recognizing that each breath indicates this precious opportunity we have as a human being to learn, to grow, to change. But our breath also signifies impermanence. We never step into the same river twice. Our body is never the same from one breath to the next. It is like a candle flame. Our breathing brings the oxygen that enables the flame to continue burning. But eventually one of these breaths will be our last. It is certain that we will die. We have no idea when we will die. We need to develop wisdom and find a peaceful mind now in this life before our opportunity ceases. As we engage in breathing meditation, we can also contemplate the reality of our death. We will definitely die. We may even die today. We don't know. And we spend our time just allowing this impression to seep into our mind. If our mind wanders, we use our breathing to return our attention to the precious opportunity we have in this life and how fleeting and transient it is, like a candle flame. imagine around us our friends, family, parents, colleagues, others who are in our life. And we can recognize that all of us are impermanent. Some of the people who've influenced us may have passed away. Eventually, all of them will. Just generate a feeling of goodwill, warmth, love towards the other people in our life, feeling that we're all in this together. And finally, we can reflect that even in this brief time together here, our minds have changed. Hopefully, we have gained some wisdom, increased our concentration, ability to pay attention. We can feel that these are pathways in our mind, that we are deepening, impressions that we are strengthening. And recognize that these same pathways can be, our own insights can be of benefit to the people around us and to society directly or indirectly.